To Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm Susan Linder, your host of the Innovation Storytellers Show. And today we are talking with the Nordic Visionaries. This is a special pocket edition of my podcast where we are talking to some of the best and brightest minds in the Nordic region about this incredible intersection between innovation and sustainability. Many companies around the world think about sustainability maybe as a second thought to how they are building and innovating products today. But I'm very excited for my two guests who are going to teach us how do we build things or how do we think about things from the ground up, where sustainability is part of the foundation of the equation of successful businesses and successful movements to get us thinking about innovating in new and sustainable ways that put climate at the center of the discussion. So I'm very excited to have with me today two young visionaries as part of our series. I'd like to introduce to you my two guests. Synne Sauar is the CEO and co-founder of Litech, a Norwegian cleantech startup using sensor and AI technology to detect hazardous objects in the waste stream, preventing fires in recycling facilities, and so much more. She holds degrees in economics and innovation from the Norwegian University of Life Sciences and Oslo Metropolitan University. In 2024, she was named to Forbes 30 Under 30 Europe list for her contributions to sustainable industry. And my other guest today, we really have a double header today. Anna Bjerre Johansen, who holds a master's degree in environmental studies and sustainability science from Lund University. She works at the intersection of climate change, new economic thinking, and politics with a strong focus on driving systemic change. Anna is currently serves as an advisor to the Green Party in the Danish Parliament, where she contributes to shaping progressive climate policy. She is also the co-author of For Future Businesses, a handbook for sustainable business practices written from a climate activist perspective. So today we're getting a double-barreled perspective on sustainable business and from the voice of a climate activist on how we can do better in building sustainable businesses. So Synne and Anna, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, thank you.
Anna, I want to start with you, our climate activist on our podcast today. Give us a little bit of your reflection. You've written this fantastic book. Tell us a little bit about how you view sustainability. How should we be thinking about sustainability from your perspective?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so actually it's a little bit odd maybe to be very focused on businesses. As a climate activist, usually we tend to focus on politicians, but we realized actually in my movement, the Green Youth movement in Denmark, that business play a core role in transforming society, and therefore we need to keep businesses also to their word when they talk about sustainability and give a clear definition of what actually is sustainable. And I recently finished my master in sustainability science, and one core thing I always return to is this. So sustainability is either there or it's not. Often we talk about things being more or less sustainable, but you can't destroy ecosystems and make up for it with economic growth, for example, or money. You cannot compensate in that way. So the value of nature isn't something that we can just buy back. That is the idea about strong sustainability, theoretically. And I think that is really important to underline. Now, in this world right now, we are exceeding a lot of the planetary boundaries regarding the climate, regarding biodiversity, acidification in the oceans, and so on. So what we need to figure out is how to get there to actual sustainability, how to not take up the earth, but actually give back to it, regenerate it. And that thing should be in the core foundation of the business. And I think that is maybe easier for startups today than for businesses that have been there for quite a while, being used to certain practices or organizational structures and so on. But I think that's, if we cannot have that thinking, that strong sustainability thinking at the core of the purpose of the business, then we will never really get there. And it's not really a discussion about doing a little more at the moment. It is a discussion of if a business needs to be or has to be sustainable also in a classical economic sense in the future with these huge transformations of the climate, we need to put it at the core. Yeah, that is the basic of everything that we are advocating for, at least in my climate movement.
So, Synne, I think what Anna said is so important. As a startup, you have an opportunity that big businesses don't, right? You have an opportunity to start your business with sustainability at its center. And it sounds like you've done that. Tell us a little bit about your company and then how you've done that.
Absolutely. So for both me and my co-founder, building a sustainable startup was like one of our core values when starting off. And that's why we came to find the waste industry interesting, because you could take resources that are already in the loop and just rearrange a little bit how it's processed, and then you have new resources. It's basically kind of resource allocating in a way. And we love the whole idea of circular economy, and we wanted to do something in particular about that. In our startup, Litech, we are developing a sensor technology to find hazard objects from the waste stream. If hazard objects such as laughing gas containers or batteries end up in the wrong stream, they can cause tremendous damage. Some waste plant will experience fires every day due to improperly disposed batteries, for instance, which is causing a lot of hassle for the waste industry. And the waste industry is, in fact, such a crucial part of keeping our society going forward. However, in our business, this is where we are starting off finding these hazard metals. But what we have developed is, in fact, just a extremely smart metal detector. We want to take this forward after we've established ourselves in the market a bit more, and also detect and classify valuable metals so we can increase recyclability in the whole waste value chain and really enhance on the circular economy perspective that the waste management has really an opportunity to be a part of.
You know, it's pretty fascinating, right? But there is money to be made in garbage. There is environmental opportunity to be made in garbage, and there's a way that we can sustain ourselves with it. So you actually started off thinking about building a company that was specifically focused around clean tech. What is the climate right now in clean tech as a startup? There's been so much shift happening, right, in the marketplace. What are you seeing right now?
So yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's what was one of the things that we really loved about the waste industry. It could be environmental and still be economically sustainable as well. Yeah, when it comes to the climate tech capital access market, I think it's definitely stagnating. The climate tech market, it's not solely looking at sustainable businesses. It needs to be sustainable seen from a economical perspective as well. And also, that's a very fair consideration of the capital market as a whole we are working in. However, I think that the best businesses is sustainable at its core, and they just happen to be profitable as well. And those businesses, such as ours, I think will always be able to access that capital. But I do find it very sad that we are seeing this shift in the climate tech investment, because startups really have the opportunity to challenge the established. And I think it's such a core part of the movement and the change that we can do in society, and giving access to these great initiatives is so important for us to be able to move forward.
Yeah. And there are trends all the time in venture capital investing. I have been in the market since 1998, watching all the different trends. I think 3 years ago, all you heard about was the blockchain and the metaverse, right? I don't hear anyone pitching any of that in VC meetings today. I hear AI from every tower. And I don't know anyone I don't know any corporate leader who doesn't have an AI strategy. And I don't know any VC who's not investing in artificial intelligence at the moment. But we go through these ebbs and flows, certainly. Anna, when I was going through your book, I was really taken by the foreword when you started at the beginning of the book. And you wrote this at the beginning: "We young people will live and work for many years to come. Our generation is the future workforce. We are the ones who will lift society into the next half century. Ecological crises are a condition of our time. So is the plunge in well-being and mental health across generations. It can be, and we don't want to set them aside when we walk through the door of a workplace. As we enter the job market, it's therefore crucial for us to enter companies that are aware of this crisis, because we will need them to be." And I think it's such a call to action, as almost like a wake up to companies, that employees are coming through the door every day looking for those sustainable solutions from their employers. I'm curious how you define like these core principles around sustainability that companies should be thinking about implementing. What would you like to see? I know you've outlined 7 core principles in the book. Can you tell us a little bit more about those?
Yeah, definitely. So the first principle, it's actually about how you handle profit, because you probably all heard about this triple bottom line, the people, planet, profit. And what we often see is that it doesn't work in practice. When, I don't know if you can say this, if shit hits the fan, then you prioritize profit, right? To keep the business alive. And that is a huge challenge. What we actually want is that businesses prioritize the planet and people part of the 3 Ps over profit. So of course you need profit to keep the business running and stable and so on, but not for itself. It's not a goal in itself. So actually you put up safeguards against prioritizing profit in the business by, for example, making your business a not-for-profit business, or using steward ownership, or there are many ways to do this. It's not like we put a single out there saying every business should be organized like this, but it's actually going into the very design of the business. What is the actual purpose? Is that a shareholder value, or is it doing something in society first of all? And then we have some other principles relating to that. Prioritizing good working lives, for example, is also really important. And to democratize decisions and decision making, that can happen in many scales, but to make it broader, invite other people in, invite customers in, invite the workers in, invite people in the value chain in to the decision making and the strategy building of the company, for making sure that the purpose is fulfilled better. Yeah, and then we have some principles regarding that. One thing that is, maybe some people would call it naive, but I actually think it's important, is that you think that you produce for users rather than consumers. People are actually, they have an agency also. And if you help them out to make sure how to, for example, reuse product, or that your product is within the circular economy, then you can actually impact a lot how people use your product and reuse it again, or use it for something else. And that you think about this whole chain of things happening of a product, from the production and how that is produced and why it's produced and for who, and could that need be fulfilled in another way than with that product, and all of these questions. Yeah. So it's a lot about taking responsibility for more than the business itself. Yeah.
I can tell you 25 years ago, no one walked around with a water bottle, right? Somewhere someone told us that we needed to be hydrated 24 hours a day, right? We needed to have water with us at all times, but also we wanted to stop buying plastic bottles. And only later would we come to learn that maybe that plastic that had been sitting in the sun, that water was somehow not as healthy for us as water that we could gather from our own taps. Or if the water was not even being filtered properly, were we even getting good water? So there are ways of changing our behavior. never in a million years did I think I would see people bringing a reusable cup to the Starbucks and having the coffee filled. So there are ways that business can have huge impacts. I know every time I book a flight now, it asks me if I want to choose with carbon offsets or not as a potential. I know that Delta Airlines is trying to put French fry oil into the planes to see if we can use that instead of gasoline. So there are ways if we decide to look forward to it. And, you know, Synne, I think the work that you're doing is fascinating because you looked at the whole waste management value chain and said, how can we be of greatest benefit to these waste management plants, right, that are having fires every day simply because of a recycling failure on our part as the consumers, or how products are managed when they get there? How did you figure out that benefit on both sides? A fire every day. Geez, what's it like to work there? That's a tough one.
Yeah, for sure. No, when we first became aware of this problem, we didn't even believe it was true. It was so insane to think about that the workers are actually being trained as firefighters because they have to be on the go if a fire is approaching and starting to evolve. It's been for us extremely important to involve the users in the development of our product, because if we didn't have their perspective, it would just be another type of initiative trying to solve the problem in a way. Like the main innovation that had happened in the field for solving this problem was mainly literal firefighting solutions. So they would invest like $10 million in robotic extinguisher or thermal cameras to reduce the harm of a fire rather than actually removing the cause. So for us, it was extremely important to involve like all of the perspective, learning how these waste management plants are actually operating and how new technology and sensor technology could fit in and actually create value for them.
And this technology has the potential for applications across lots of different opportunities, right? Because you're creating the sensor.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are creating the hardware, but then the AI on top of it is making it all possible. So it's a two-side innovation, you can say. But yeah, we want to become the company with the greatest metal detector in the world, and removing hazard from the waste stream is a perfect way to start, because then we can actually benefit the society and improve waste management as a whole. And then we will eventually move forward and find new use cases for the technology, because we certainly see great advantage of having advancement in this sector and generating more kind of removing more and more resources that can be recycled from the waste stream.
Yeah, clearly we haven't done a good enough job on all the things we could be recycling. It's still, I think it's less than 10% of materials in the United States that are sent to recycling are actually recycled. Most of it, I think more than 90% winds up making it to the landfill.
Yeah, and I think the US stands for 10 or 15% of the whole waste generation in the world. So it's certainly some work to do. And here's EU a great example, because compared to the US, in EU, it's actually illegal to landfill most type of waste fraction. We actually have more governmental incentives to enhance recycling in a more kind of proper way. And for the US, the main driver is definitely the economical part. So if it's profitable to recycle, it will increase the recycling rates.
Anna, I'm so curious, how did Danish businesses respond to your book when you came out as activists telling businesses how to think about sustainability in a different way? How did they respond to your book?
We were really nervous about it, actually, because we felt that we were saying something new, and that is always nerve-wracking. But they actually really welcomed us, and especially sustainability advisors and companies, because I think they were almost relieved that someone said some of these things because they were trying to convince their companies to put sustainability at the center, and that is often really difficult when it's also a business that has to grow and so on. And I think one of the core things that are changing, actually just today I was at a conference for making up new visions for a climate neutral Danish business, which is interesting because right now we are discussing growth a lot. Like how can growth be sustainable? And is it even possible in that sense? Because this decoupling between economic growth exponentially and our energy use, our resource use is not really possible. We cannot do that absolutely. We can do that maybe relatively in some sectors and so on, but we cannot do it absolutely. There is a very deep interconnection. So we also need to rethink whether the success of a business is to grow always. We have this metaphor of in the Green Youth Movement that businesses should think themselves growing as trees. So in the beginning, of course, you need to set roots, you need to grow to figure out like where you are stable in a good position to fulfill your purpose. And then maybe you don't grow taller in the end, but you grow in other ways with new branches and new leaves. So rethink that whole growth idea that is really strong still, but is changing. And I think that will change even more, and especially in the Nordic countries now. For example, the British economist Kate Raworth, she came up with this term donut economics, which is the idea that instead of setting GDP growth as the goal of an economy, then you actually set the goal to be to get into the donut being an outside circle of planetary boundaries that you need to get under, and an inside circle of social well-being and security that you need to get over for everyone. And that being a new goal for the economy and therefore also businesses, because companies are a core part of the economy, of course. And I also think that in a very important part of that question is to remember that the economy isn't fixed. It's just how we choose to produce and care for one another, and its rules and its values were made up by people, which means that they can also be changed by people. So I do think that it's possible to build a well-being economy, a new economy based on other things than growth alone.
So
And that is happening now slowly.
So where does innovation fit into that scenario, Anna, in your mind? I know you cover it briefly in your book too.
Yeah, so we think actually that this is the burning platform. The climate crisis, the ecological crisis is here, which means that we need innovation more than ever. And we actually think that if you loosen up on the need to grow, like fundamentally, then you actually can explore more types of innovation. In the Nordic countries, there's a strong tradition for community-based innovations and partnerships, for example, and social innovation, organizational innovation that not always give immediate growth, but actually makes the society, the local society or broader society, a better place and more sustainable and with more well-being. So I do think that innovation, people are innovative at the core, and I don't think that the need for a new economy will hinder growth. Actually, I think it will only support it. Also, for example, in the Nordic countries, we have quite high taxes compared to the US, and that does not hinder growth. That just means that we have a foundation for that people are not, they don't need to innovate to make sure to get a lot of money because there is a social security, for example. Yeah, I'm unsure if I really asked the question. I hope so. But I do think that we can actually innovate in more ways if we don't only think about, for example, technological innovations, as you often think of as the first thing, but also other types of human innovations.
Yeah. And there are so many different kinds of innovation that we cover on the show. Innovation is business model transformation. It's a people-centric transformation, how we organize teams and organizations. It might be a new product or a new service, but it might also be new materials that wind up demonstrating how we make things or break things in the case of waste and bring them back together. I want to ask you some hot seat questions that I ask all my guests on the Nordic Visionaries, but I want to take some time to really get your answers here. I'm curious, who are the Nordic innovators and maybe some sustainability leaders who have really inspired you? I'm thinking about authors or environmentalists, designers, even books that you've read that really matter to you, or programs that you've seen that matter. Who's inspired you? Synne, maybe start with you.
Yeah, sure. I think that we can achieve so much with technological advancement in terms of sustainability. So certainly one of the companies or people I look up to has been in your podcast, the CEO of Tamra, Tove. She is a great transformative leader. And I think leading a company of that type of size, it requires you also to be aware of your surroundings and actually be aware of your footprint, because you do have a huge footprint. And Tamra started off as this reverse vending machine. We have this thing in Norway where we get, every time we buy a water bottle, you pay 2 kroners extra, which is like 50 cents or something, and then you get it back if you return it to the place. And I think that way of thinking has really opened up so many new ways of thinking about how we can actually. This is also a little bit from the societal part, because this is actually changing a community in a way, like changing behaviors. And I think this, with enabling this through both technology and this motivational factor as well, has been such a pivotal and leading way of enforcing new technologies that has really contributed positive.
Yeah, this is the behavior change that you were talking about, Anna, right? Who inspires you, Anna?
The first name I came up with it's a guy called Markus Feldhus. And he's the founder of, it's a business, but it's also a think tank called Post Growth Guide. And you can find it on LinkedIn. And it's even in English, which is pretty smart. but he's doing a business where he is advising businesses how to turn post growth, actually related to what I said before, that you repoint like the business in a new direction. And we have been we had a lot of discussions with him through the work of this book. We actually had discussions with many small or middle-sized businesses in Denmark to give feedback on our principles and so on. And he was really good at making everything very concrete and understandable, because as you probably hear me saying, it's very abstract also sometimes, these reflections on what is sustainability and what is a business that has legitimacy in a green just future. How does that look? But he's really good at that. And then also Jennifer Hinton, who is a scientist actually, but working a lot with not-for-profit businesses and helping them to function in a very growth-focused society and profit-focused society, with also a lot of very helpful ideas and explanations on how you can do things for profit and with a broader societal perspective. So yeah, Markus Feldhus and Jennifer Hinton, they are really inspirational to me.
I will definitely check them out. I have to ask the question, where does Greta Thunberg play a role in your perspectives on who inspires you, or how do you feel about her work?
She was actually one of the reasons I first became a climate activist.
Uh-huh.
I remember that back in 18 and 19, and I saw these speeches that she did for world leaders, and I was so overwhelmed that someone was saying the things that I felt. Yeah, and then actually I met her a few times in Nordic climate activist campaigns and actions that we've done. And yeah, it's so inspirational that actually she goes on and on, even though I think she is also it's really been tough to say these things so many times and had the feeling that everything is going so slow still. But the way that she's like fighting for something that she feels is right and sense that is right, I think that kind of energy and a motivation, and not passive hope but active hope, should enter into many other areas and into more and more people, because I think that mobilization for that if I think that I can change, and I think that my neighbor will also change, and I trust that, then really a lot of things can happen. Yeah.
Amen. Synne, I'm curious too. Is Greta Thunberg had an impact on you as a climate tech focused business owner?
Probably indirectly. I remember her so clearly, and in the back in the day when she came forward, and this young strong voice screaming to these world leaders about what we need to do. How can we just stand here and watch the world burning? No, although she has been criticized a whole lot, I think she is really inspirational, and she's such an important role in the climate discussion. And I think it's fantastic that we have these young female strong voices in this discussion that is really not afraid to say exactly how it is.
Yeah. And there's something about representation, right? Of seeing a young woman who was still in high school, really, when she started, right? To know that such a young voice could stand up in the midst of this and say what needed to be said, what she needed to say. I'm also curious, and maybe this is a question for both of you, is what do you think American listeners can learn from Nordic approaches to innovation and sustainability? What should young leaders here in the United States take from it? If there's an equivalent you here in America, what do you think they could learn from Nordic approaches to the young visionaries here in the States? And maybe some of the older ones. Synne, what do you think?
That's a very good question, and it's very interesting because we always hear this as a tech startup. How can we be more like the Americans? Because we need to think big and now rather than later, because time is money, and we need to act in a certain pace and grow in a certain way in order to be able to raise money. And I think maybe one of the things that Nordic companies have in common is a sort of transparency in the way we're doing stuff. Although, of course, it's not for something that everyone is doing, but I think transparency is something that we are quite good at. This leads to a found of trust that we have in each other, and also in the government. We are trusting each other, our neighbors and the government, that they have good interests in heart. And I think that also leads both businesses and people to do better things.
And what about you, Anna? What do you think Americans could learn from a Nordic perspective?
I think actually some similar things that Synne said, especially regarding trust. I think one reason that our societies work well is because of trust. I mean, that we have this feeling that, okay, if I do something for society, then others will do that too. And it's a value that I think we put really high. Many things would fall apart in Denmark, at least, if we did not trust each other. And we would have to put a lot more laws in place, probably.
We have a lot
if
of
we
them
did not
here.
do that. Yeah. And then I also think that this organizational structure of a business to be a cooperative is also something that is a foundational thing in the Nordic countries, to have many businesses that are corporations and are working with a broader sense of responsibility, as I talked about before, inviting local consumers on board, inviting people representing biodiversity and nature on board, and having this one person, one voice tradition, making sure that it's not only the biggest companies that decide what will happen, but it's a communal, it's a democratic decision-making process that points out the strategy for the businesses. Yeah.
Okay, so last question. Where do you think we should be focusing our attention when it comes to the climate over the next 5 years? So if we had this conversation again in 2030, what should we have been focusing on for the last 5 years? What do you think? Anna, maybe you can start us off.
I think we should be focusing on, what can you call it, definitive sustainability. So actually daring to create long-term visions for how does this actually sustainable society look like, and how can we position ourselves in that to make sure that we underpin that vision. I think what happens right now, and what often happens with sustainability, it's that people sense that it's important, but it's not acutely important, because what happens tomorrow is more important maybe. And that has to change. That short-term thinking and short-term strategizing needs to be replaced by a longer vision for making sure that we don't forget what was actually the purpose now when geopolitics change, or a virus spreads, or what it can be, so that we keep a stability also in that strategizing.
Yeah, that's right. We need the long term, the longevity of the movement to keep going. Yeah. Synne, what about you? What do you think? What should we be thinking about over the next 5 years?
I think we should definitely take the circular economy into action and become more circular, because I think by building businesses that are in the core of its business sustainable, and by its growing, it will generate more positive impact on the planet. I think that's a great way to both be a profitable business that is also generating value from a climate point perspective. And I think we actually have the opportunity to do so, because to be able to enhance in a circular economy, we need to have a fundamental collaboration willingness. And this is something that Anna mentioned as one of the core values that maybe the Nordics have. But I also think it's something that we will see more and more of. But enabling these opportunities for businesses to create collaborative value chains that can actually enable a circular economy in practice, I think is what's gonna really have a great impact on the sustainable development.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you both so much for joining me on Nordic Visionaries today. If people want to get in touch with you, Synne, what is the best way to do that?
You can reach me on LinkedIn or email. I will always respond.
Fantastic. And Anna, how about you? What's the best way to get involved with the movement and to find your book?
I can also be reached on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest. And then I can definitely also make sure to write out on LinkedIn when the book is available in English. Unfortunately, it's a Danish project right now, but I would really be happy to get in touch with everyone interested in the visions.
Fantastic. We might need to practice our Danish. Thank you both so much for joining me on the show today, and another episode of Nordic Visionaries with my young Nordic visionaries and their fantastic vision for what's to come. Thank you.
Thank you.